Wow, what a nice introduction. It scares me, actually. Anyway, it's my great pleasure to be here. It's been a few years since I've been here and had the opportunity to be with you. When I was leaving, I told my wife, I love to go to Singapore because I always learn so much from everybody. And that so much is the description of what this conference is all about, is not just hearing data, but learning from each other. So I always like to start off my meetings with having you all stand up, turn around, introduce yourself to somebody new, and tell them why you're here. Could you do that for me now? Stand up, do it. Good. Perfect. Thank you. Excellent. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Thanks very much. That's exactly, well, did you all meet somebody new? Well, inside of this room, my sense is that there's a huge amount of knowledge. And while the speakers here today will be sharing what they know about technology or their approaches or their methodology or organizations, inside this body, inside this room, is collectively some of the greatest knowledge about the application of geography and the future of, in your case, your country in the world. So I want you to invite you to keep doing this again and again, all during these couple of days. Here's the slide that I think underpins what I'm trying to get across. You and your work have never been so important, and we'll touch on why during this morning's conversation. The kinds of changes that are going on the planet right now are unprecedented. And Singapore stands out, in my mind, as the leading city in the world confronting these challenges, making things more efficient, dealing with the issues of climate change, of population density, of transportation, dealing with social harmony and the ability to get along and understand. This is an amazing experience for me. Again, I'll just underpin it. You and your work are providing a kind of foundation, infrastructure for the creation of the future, creating what's next for Singapore. And Thomas emphasized this in his opening remarks. You rest on the shoulders of a whole generation of people who had in their brains the idea of making a smarter city, a smarter approach. And whether it was in technology or social reform or looking at issues of equality or democracy, they laid it down. So today we're going to explore what's next. What's next for your smart city, and what can we collectively do to make it better? I'll start this morning's conversation with a little bit of profiling of your work, and some of it will be your work specifically, and some of it will be your work collectively as a global community. Here in Singapore, we see extremely interesting applications of GIS in 3D visualization, but not just visualization, also in analytics, for example, picking out the best place for solar or wind modeling, or doing connection between government agencies and citizens. We also see the applications of real-time, for example, supporting the National Day Parade, or real-time looking at the environmental challenges of haze here, both in the community but also beyond regionally. Some of your work is pushing the envelope in green cities. The National Parks Organization here looking at habitats and managing parks, digitizing almost every tree. We also see applications of K through 12. These 60 students, these 60 schools here creating the next generation of geographically literate kids are just the beginning. And we're seeing GIS move into consumer level technologies, things like navigation here at the university. Beyond Singapore, across the world, GIS is having a huge impact on managing land information systems, not just the parcel cadastre, but also the interpretation of that, land use planning, showing valuation, showing property valuation as a surface, being able to support 3D cadastre and 3D appraisals. In urban planning, not only here in Singapore, but in Abu Dhabi, building whole new towns, or in Korea, just north of you here, doing urban redevelopment, and just beautiful not only visualizations, but also good footprints about creating more livable cities. And GIS is moving into buildings, into campuses, being able to visualize them, but also optimize things like space planning or logistics, or just being able to see what buildings are all about, monitoring their IoT or their sensors with respect to better building management. In transportation, whether it's railroads or airports or roadways, we can see, or shipping, we can see advances being made. I'll call your attention here to the map showing bicycle sharing in Manhattan in New York City. And by the way, this is an opportunity for me to be pretty excited. Yesterday, New York City decided to award Esri their 3D GIS cadastre for the entire city. It's a, well, maybe it doesn't mean much to you, but it means a lot to me. So here you go. In some ways, they're copying the vision and the thoughts about next generation 3D that you have pioneered here with things like your advanced 3D mapping platform. GIS has also moved into the engineering space, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. But engineers around the world, architects, public works organizations are using it as a platform for doing field work, for doing engineering design. And I wanted to particularly call your attention here to the red map in the center. It has huge application in Singapore. Actually, that's a joke. This is in South Dakota, where it's very cold in the winter. The freezing causes sidewalks to heave, move up and down. So anyway, I guess you don't get the joke, but it's an interesting application. In the utility space, GIS has moved beyond simply managing the assets to being able to do analytics, like where and when are power consumption thresholds being reached. And dashboards, as you'll see here and throughout the morning, are the new style of GIS, looking at real-time maps and real-time charts to understand what's going on. The city of Topeka, Kansas, has 300 dashboards wired up. They're looking at virtually everything with respect to performance or real-time operations that are going on. And here in the lower right, I want you to notice augmented reality. The engineers there are taking out iPads into the field and seeing the pipes and the wires underground, dial toning in the GIS underground to understand their communities. Clearly, in the field of public safety, GIS is contributing to making cities safer, showing patterns of crime, and also, for example, your National Day event. Similarly, in the United States, we have something called the Super Bowl, a huge basketball, sorry, no, not basketball, not soccer, football, that's what it is, Super Bowl. It's also supposed to be a joke, but you don't get it. It shows you how illiterate I am in sports. But this national event has about 1 million people that come to it or around it, and so national security is a big issue there. GIS is helping provide the answers. Our world is changing rapidly, as we know, and this is confronting with things like climate change, more fires. We notice that there are new tools to be able to address these sorts of challenges, and GIS is being used not only to prepare for, but also address these challenges increasingly in real time. Finally, a big trend that's occurring in our community is more open open connections with open data through portals, more citizen engagement, back and forth interactions and crowdsourcing through maps, and finally, organizational portals inside of organizations to let people understand the work that they're doing, the kinds of maps and services that they're creating, so that they can exchange and collaborate in a new way. Well, this is just these are just a few of the examples of work going on. And your work, I'm told, yesterday I listened to a briefing of so much of it, is just amazing because it reflects exactly these examples. And we can learn from each other. Again, I urge that you share and document your work as you go along, because it is through your friends and this exact network that we really learn and grow as a community. The vision I want to talk about is what's next, and also inspiring what's next. And for most of you, you'll think, okay, he's going to talk about what's next with a technology, or what's next in its application. And that's certainly so. I'm going to do that. But as I do that, I want you to pause for a moment and think about what's next for our planet. And what does that mean for your organization? What's next for our planet, considering the direction that the arrows are going? And what does that mean for your own personal career and your family, and for you as an individual? We live today in a complex and interconnected world. Those of you with geography backgrounds understand this very clearly. Things are interconnected. Geography, the science of our world, helps us understand and model and predict, describe, and even organize both the human side of our world and our natural world. Intellectually, it brings it together. And we also know that our world is constantly changing, driven by a number of parameters like population growth or technology achievement. You and I can notice, and certainly Singapore is an example of this, that the pace of change is accelerating. When I come here, I notice it. I mean, you living here probably don't notice this sort of incremental change. And this change, here I'm not talking about just Singapore, this change globally is creating many challenges. It's threatening our natural world. And some are beginning to say threatening even our future as human beings. And the evidence is very clear. The maps, the models, the predictions of what's happening with everything from water to food to loss of biodiversity to overpopulation. These are the kinds of challenges, ladies and gentlemen, that you particularly are focused on. From my perspective, we're now, I'm an old man, all right? But I've been watching this for a long time. From my perspective, we're now at a place that humans have never been. And that's a sobering thought, that we're moving into a space, not by choice, but maybe you might say by choice, where humans have never explored before. And my personal philosophy is that this is going to require much, much more understanding. It's going to require understanding and collaboration, and ultimately action by our institutions, in our policy, in the way we live our lives, in all of these things. We're going to have to use our best science, our best people, our best technology to be able to address these challenges. So the question that I ask is, what should we do? And I suppose many of you have asked that question. What can I do as an individual? And certainly you might say, as an individual, maybe I can't do that much. I can do something. And by the way, many people around the world that I visit with are asking those questions. What can we do? And there's many good solutions that are emerging. But for us in this room, for us uniquely in this room, we can begin to apply with force the power of digital geography, your career, and envision what's possible, improve things. And this is in the culture of Singapore, isn't it? What more natural place for this to emerge as a powerful force, engaging citizens, protecting biodiversity, as we'll hear later this morning, thinking about how to design with nature, making things smarter, as Thomas said. And from my perspective, this requires all of us to keep moving and learning. It's no time to settle back or take our paddle out of the canoe. No, we have to accelerate as professionals, you and I, what we're doing, applying our best science and holistic design thinking to take on these challenges. Now this field, your field, the science of where, provides us a framework to apply geographic knowledge. It's both a framework and a process to create geographic knowledge and apply it, starting with measurements and communication vehicles like maps, and then analytic models using the best models in AI and machine learning to be able to predict, and then make these predictions and this understanding integrated right into the way that we design and plan. And again, my heart is lifted when I come to Singapore and listen to you talk about your thoughts about creating planning processes and design processes which integrate science into not only thinking about the future, but also acting it out. This science of where provides us with a foundation, certainly for GIS, the practice that many of you do. And it's now expanding into GIS with simpler tools for simple mapping and a simpler technology pattern of location analytics. It's now also emerging to be components of other information systems, geo-enabling, bringing our science into other independent systems. They're not necessarily GIS, but they make geography and GIS come alive in other IT and workflow systems. Like the rest of the world, technology is fueling the growth and advancement of our field. And I'll spend quite a bit of time talking about that, integrating more data, bigger data, better data, computing and innovation, creating new patterns of GIS. It's not mainframe GIS anymore. It's not workstation or PC or even servers. It's a new pattern which is much easier. Web GIS. This is expanding the power of GIS with more data, new data types, crowdsourcing, new kinds of imagery, LiDAR, new measurement. It's also advancing with new forms of computing, not only faster machines, but also new integration with tools like AI or IoT, real-time, new forms of architecture, distributed computing. And it's also being fueled by new innovations in our field, better visualization and modeling tools, smart mapping, AI connections and integration, and many others. The outcome of these trends, these forces, has resulted in a whole new pattern, this WebGIS pattern. And that WebGIS pattern is a new architecture. How many of you feel like you know this architecture quite well? Really? 2 people? Are you sure? Let me ask the question again. How many of you feel like you understand the WebGIS pattern? Okay, that's better. 17%. Now, let's do it one more time. Is it really only 17% that really understand the concept of a web GIS as opposed to desktop GIS? How many of you understand it conceptually? Okay, that's 46%. That's better. So that gives me a purpose in my talk. Let's first recognize that the web GIS is a new architecture. It's not client server. It's not desktop architecture. It's a new architecture that's built on services. So my data I can serve out as a web service, like a dial tone, and you can consume my web service. That's one of the basic concepts. So in addition to open data, I'm open servicing the web. And you don't have to share all of your data, but you can share the data that you want to share with who you want to share it to. So I can share in a collective environment, kind of like a database can, putting it all into a database, but I put it into a services framework, and other people can discover services, integrate them, mash them up, leverage them in various applications. So this sharing and collaboration concept is essential to understanding the architecture. And my content can be on a distributed network of machines, some over there, some over there, some over there, some in this agency, some in that agency, and it can live there. I don't have to copy it anymore. I can just read it dynamically and integrate it and mash it up for my application. That's different than we dealt with in the 80s or the 90s or the first part of the century. It's actually the fabric that allows us to collaborate. That's why friendship is so important. I want to share with you my content in such a way that allows you to leverage me, leverage my knowledge, leverage my measurements, leverage my models. So this architecture is really important. It's an essential building block. So next year or the year after, or whenever I come back, I want to have 100% of you say, yes, of course I get it. That's like air or water. It's essential to what the next generation of GIS is providing us. What makes it so compelling is not one thing. It's a bunch of little things. First, it's easy and accessible, but it has these little components, things like web maps as a service, and web apps that allow me to make any geographic data come alive, and online content, and smart, and hubs, and location analytics, and solution apps. It's a whole network of things that are fueled by the good work that you guys are doing, creating, maintaining, and making available these data sets. So in some ways, this is an old approach, maps and GIS on the web, but in other ways, it's a brand new approach. And let me share further. Web maps, a central ingredient for abstracting data from different distributed machines, allow us to engage and interconnect everybody. Just like a consumer map, like a Google map, can be viewed easily on any device, web maps can be viewed on any device. And they're simple. I can pan and zoom, but they're richer. And these data sets can be static, but they can also be real time. So there's some discussion here in this community about next generation, the fourth industrial age. It really means IoT, intelligence, and I think GIS coming together through real-time maps. And these maps can be looked in apps that are on any device, anywhere, anytime. Dashboard apps, field apps, consumer apps, real-time apps, story map apps, and there are just dozens of them. These apps are taking GIS to the edge of applications inside of your organization and between and among organizations. These maps and the tools are helping us develop location intelligence. Location intelligence is a state of being. It's not a new thing to buy. It's what many of you create now. But location intelligence with new tools like insights, spatial BI tools that allow us to drag and drop data and visualize it simply, are taking GIS to the edge, opening up the powerful analytic tools that many of you do to everyone in a browser environment. And at the same time, we're learning how to read in massive real-time data from remote sensing and mixing that with the power of GIS and AI are allowing us to build a whole new generation of models that predict reliable spatial information, like the map in the upper left is the water flow forecasted 15 days in advance in streams in the United States. Well, that means that I can, how did this map happen? It took the rainfall forecasts 15 days in advance, layered it on top of the hydrology stream network, flowed the water through the network, and showed where the floods are going to be in 15 days out. You understand what this is doing? This is a very sophisticated model. And it's an example of, it's not the thing, but it's an example of the kind of models that are being reached. Well, let me move on. This same WebGIS pattern is driving a word called digital transformation. It's helping organizations re-envision everything that they do, their workflows. Now, most of us have experienced some form of digital automation. That's kind of like stage one. We automated a particular piece of work, making maps, doing a product, whatever. These digital workflows are now being connected through the web as services so that different departments' content can be interconnected and fused dynamically. Sort of a real-time GIS that integrates our collective work in real time. So I can tell some of you are sort of not paying attention or saying, okay, that's kind of an abstraction idea. I want you to pay attention, because this interconnection of digital work and then integration of it in real time means that all measurement, all science, all work can begin to be integrated holistically. That's, for people from a geography background, that's a big thing. And this isn't some abstract thing. This is all about your organization. How can we wire up and architect in such a way your organization so the whole organization starts to operate at the speed of light and starts to collaborate at the speed of light? This is a big idea. And it's just beginning. So ladies and gentlemen, as you build these components and you serverize them, we're moving to a massive change in the way government and the private sector and even universities operate. Interconnected information, leveraging the location dimension, your field, to make organizations integrate and therefore act in more responsible ways. And if we spread this out beyond Singapore, it's just beginning. We're living in an era where changes are occurring everywhere. Automated cars, cloud computing, pervasive mapping, AI, autonomous vehicles as it's called. And you'll notice in the white text here, a lot of these little things are geospatial. Satellite imagery coming in real time, GPS, location intelligence, geoaccounting. This change and the fusion of this change is just beginning. And GIS, this new WebGIS pattern, is the thing that's bringing it together. It's going to bring it together over the next 5 and 10 years as a way to integrate everything. So this should excite you. I hope this excites you. It excites me because I can start to see that things are not going to just keep going in the wrong direction. We can actually begin to have a platform for collaboration and creating a better future. And I'll return to this question, what can we do as individuals? How do we take the next step? And my sense is we need to embrace all these technical changes, not sort of look at it, not be sideline players. Those in the geospatial GIS community need to leverage what we have and offer what we have and play big in envisioning a brighter and a better future. Put the foot down on the gas pedal, in other words, and embrace it and learn continuously and share and begin to operate as a collective group to create a better future. Now, you might ask the question, is this real? Or is this just some baloney that Jack is talking about? Is this a vision? Or is this going to actually happen? That's a fair question, wouldn't you say? It's a fair question. Is it real or is it just some vision? Well, I've done a lot of thinking about this, and it's my sense at this point in my life, it's my sense and also my experience that this is not only possible, but it's also inevitable. Now let me change the subject for a moment. Esri, our work, my colleagues and myself, think of our efforts as building technology and supporting our users, you, in doing your work. And in the process of doing that, building technology that takes on the responsibility of addressing these other greater challenges that are facing all of us. And we do that in the form of technology and specifically in the form of ArcGIS. And I hope if I asked you to raise your hands, you'd all know what ArcGIS is. It is a comprehensive platform that is now completely services-based. It'll still work in a client-server environment, but it's now services-based and open and interoperable. And that platform is actually 3 systems in one system. It's a system of record keeping, like a database was, cadastral records, pipe records, electrical records. It's also a system of analytics, providing people with insights and forecasts. And finally, it's a system of engagement through maps. I can connect people, story maps, interactive maps. One system, 3 different subsystems that leverage the power of geography to bring those parts of an organization together. Very powerful. So you in this room are unique in the IT space in the sense that you bring things in your organization together in meaningful ways. ArcGIS integrates all types of data, imagery data, LiDAR data, map data, 3D data, real-time data. It brings it all together in that setting. And also it organizes and manages distributed content through something called Portal. Portal organizes data and services, references them in a catalog. It references information products in a catalog and apps. So I can search the portal and find each other's work. It also organizes people. I'm Jack. I have certain privileges to get at certain data. So this portal idea is, again, really central to the future of a web GIS. It's like the organizing principle in a services environment.